to mediatorpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about mediation, negotiation, and collaboration. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a valuation expert and divorce financial mediator in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we're actually going to talk through this concept of how to be a traditional wife or a trad wife with Erika Anne Englund. She's actually located in Sacramento. She's an attorney. She's a mediator. She's a divorce strategist. Of the people that I know that create strategy like me, she is there, but she has the legal and the financial and the people skills with 18 years plus experience and really helping people try to divorce better. Welcome, Erika. How are you?
So delighted to be here. Thank you.
It's been a long time. Erika and I did a podcast a long time ago. I don't know how many years ago. And so how is everything now? Like, just give people a little primer, because yes, we're talking about traditional wife things, but what does that really mean? Like, maybe we should start off kind of explaining what we're going to talk about and maybe like why your background is relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, that expression, all roads lead to Rome. And sometimes you realize everything that you've been doing in your career, in your personal life, have kind of brought you to a certain place. And for me, that place is divorce strategy. I don't know if that exists elsewhere or I make it up and just pretend it exists. But essentially, it's providing people with the legal guidance they need to get through divorce because it's a lawsuit, even though we don't think of it that way, but also more than that, addressing the person, their goals, their priorities, and what they want to see happen for their own life. So we're not like doctors just treating the injury. Its strategy is about really taking somebody from here to there. And there is something I'm seeing over and over in my office right now, and it is regret. It's like, hey, I wish that I spent the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years putting my finances together, understanding anything, getting information about how to support myself. And all of a sudden, I'm at the place where I'm at without knowledge, without resources, without empowerment. And what do I do? And like, I love that as a puzzle and a challenge, but I don't want that for people. So I'm here to help people going into marriage take a look at some things that they can do to not get themselves in that position later on.
Well, and how to be a traditional wife is what we've named some of this, or a trad wife, because of historically how women have married and how couples have come together. And Anna, who also is affiliated with the podcast, is also here because we thought this would be a good conversation, not only with people who, are in the stages of before getting married, right? They're getting married in a time frame that's completely different than you and I maybe, initially wanted to go up. But the conversation is really around different ways to relationship. But the central fact is that the court system doesn't really have an efficient way to get divorced financially. And each state makes rules around it that then the lawyers have to kind of traverse. And you have to pay kind of a lawyer to be your Sherpa in this horrible trip up the mountain, when what we do is come in and say, hey, there's a hidden doorway that you could go straight through the mountain and you might not have to go through all this. And it's covered and air conditioned and all of these things. But even if you stepped further in front of that, what if we married different, right?
Yeah.
Not just how do we divorce, but how do we marry different? And how do we protect ourselves? Or, if I'm going to be the stay-at-home person, how do I go into this with all eyes knowing it? All of us are saying, hey, this is what our roles are going to be. What does it look like? But also, where did you start, Erika? I mean, do you have a divorce story? Is that how you got passionate about this? Or are you just trying to help the world?
No, this is what happened. I wanted to be an estate planning attorney because I thought people should have the ability to control what happens with their money and their finances and their family, and they deserve that security, particularly people who at that point didn't have the right to marry. I thought, this is great. Estate planning it is. I took federal tax class and I got a C. And the tax teacher said, you're never going to be an estate planning attorney with this grade. And I just believed her. Looking back, I cannot believe I let one sentence change the trajectory of my whole life. But I thought, damn, I better choose a new path. And it's going to be divorce, because it's a little court. It's not court. It's working with people. I can own my own business. I have no interest in divorce. It'll never happen to me. Right? Of course. And so I got into it totally through a side door and realized immediately that I hated it. It was awful. Nobody ever wins, because, family lawyers say a good settlement is when both people are equally unhappy, which is BS to me. Most of the time people settle, they're unhappy. Sometimes they win. It costs $1 million. They have a bunch of gray hair. They've destroyed their family. Like, that's not a win. So I think just 1 or 2 years into it, I realized I am not going to be able to do this divorce litigation. I have to instead lean into being a middle child, being an Aquarius. I am a collaborator. So I'm going to shut down my litigation practice, just be a divorce mediator, and that's going to be it. And people told me things like, oh, that's a really nice career for people who are afraid to be in court. Or like, if you don't have what it takes to be a lawyer, then you'll be a good mediator. Or like, for women, it's probably nice to have to not be a lawyer. So it was, I won't say I got a lot of support with it. And this was in 2010, so 1 million years ago. And what I found is, like, I loved mediation. I loved giving people tools like you do, giving people their own tools to create their own solutions instead of being their guide through a terrible exploitative system. So thank you to my tax teacher, because I would never be here without her. Thank you to the legal tech world. I took a little break from being a divorce attorney to go and be chief of strategy for a legal tech company for a few years. And I learned the strategy application to law, which is nothing more than looking at the big picture first and constantly ensuring that your small steps are moving you toward a big picture. That sounds basic, but lawyers don't do that. Financial planners, it's all that you do. That's like in your blood, not for lawyers. So I came back and I was like, I'm going to just be a strategist, be a mediator, and help guide and support people through a system that is not good for people and families. And at the same time, I'm seeing on TikTok of Anna's generation this great romanticism with being a wife who hands total power and control to her husband. Because Anna, I don't know, like, if you saw what we saw with our parents and how our moms struggled to find a place in the world. And for people of your generation, like, how that might be impacting the romanticism with which they view traditional marriage.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to be part of this conversation today, because I do all the podcast editing and the producing. So I'm on the back end of all these conversations, and I hear so much and I see so much. But then in my personal life, I've never been married. I'm in my 20s. I live a very non-traditional life. I live internationally full time. But it's funny, because I'm from the Midwest. So the Midwest has a very certain type of culture where you go to high school or you go to college and you meet someone. You have a high school sweetheart, you meet someone in college, and then you quickly move things along. You get a job in the city that you went to university in. You buy a house, you get married, you have children, all within a few years after graduating. And I'm looking at myself. I've graduated 5 years ago, and I'm still figuring my things out. And I couldn't imagine having a marriage and children on top of everything. But then the opposite is I grew up, and ever since I can remember, my mom always said, go to school, get a house, figure out your career, then you date, then you get married. Then, so I had that contradicting growing up in the Midwest.
It's
Well,
like two
everyone else
different
is doing,
worlds to be
yeah,
existing, right? So you
yeah,
get the influence of both.
yeah.
And so what's happening with your friends? Are
Mm-hmm.
your friends getting married? Are they getting prenups? Are they thinking about the day that their marriage, either through death or divorce, ends? What's going on?
Yeah, so I have a few friends that are already married. Prenups were not in the conversation. I've brought it up now. Now working in this industry, I've asked, well, did you ever consider a prenup? And it's what? But I don't think that's ever a conversation. And I've been the first one to bring that up to my friends. So a lot of my friends are still just in the dating phase, and we have these conversations now that I'm starting to bring that up. But prenups were just, I grew up thinking, well, that's what celebrities do. Why would I need a prenup? Why would someone from the Midwest ever need a prenup? Like, I don't think that that's something that a typical person would get. So I would love, Erika, if you could explain the process of a prenup and how necessary that is. And almost like, is it an easy thing to do? Is it difficult? Do you need tons and tons of assets?
I explain it to people this way. Everyone who gets married has a prenup. Everyone has a prenup. You either create one with a contract and attorneys before you get married, and then on your own terms, you've laid out what's going to happen in the event of death or divorce. Or if you don't do that, your prenup is whatever your state's laws have decided is fair. And you're going to have no way to change that outcome later on. So people who go into marriage with this like romantic idea that it's never going to end, first of all, it does, because we all have a termination date. But they are just putting themselves in the hands of whatever the laws are at that point. Those laws are going to decide what's fair, not me and not my spouse. So the prenup, I think for younger people, may be helpful to frame in the term of, this is empowering for you and it gives you control. It's not really about money. It's not protecting things, because you don't maybe have so much to protect at this point. Feels unreasonable.
Right.
But like Kanye said, if you ain't no punk, you holler, we want prenup. But that's Kanye. He's a crazy celebrity with a lot of money and a strange Tesla truck. You have a different life. So for younger people, I think like it's more of, what are the terms that you want to operate your relationship on? Do you want to know what those terms are? Do you want to be on the same page? Do you want to be in alignment? Because if so, this is a great opportunity to do it. Is it a hard process? Harder than it should be. There are some legal tech firms, Hello Divorce and Hello Prenup, different companies, same name, and they are streamlining the process. It's still a little harder than it should be. And I think, Melissa, you would agree. Anything that involves lawyers is still harder than it should be, but like we're working on ways to make it easier.
Well, and a prenup is a legal agreement that people do before they go into court, which is a legal arrangement of marriage that we call it, but it's still two people coming together. And basically those people are coming together with no operating agreement, no partnership agreement, no buy sell, like I equate a lot of this to business. And even in a prenup, if I'm marrying somebody that has things, and the state is always creating laws that come back and fix the situation afterwards, right? So they go through a case and they're like, oh, well, we messed that case up. So how do we prevent that from happening in the future? Well, everything is separate, right? The laws don't create an easy way to financially maneuver through it. So then you're having to hire people to understand the laws and the finance and things like that. So, a prenup in my time when I was growing up was the kiss of death. It was we're going to sign an agreement to guarantee that we're going to get divorced, and how are we going to get divorced? And so some of it is perception in what that looks like. And that kind of gets to the whole point of this conversation today, should be like, yeah, how do you become a traditional wife, but protect yourself if that's what you want? And if it's not what you want, how do you then establish that a prenup could really just be like, hey, we're going to talk about how this works. Like, do you think I should be taking out the trash all the time? Because I don't ever want to do that. Like it, and I'm making it simplistic, but if we dial it back a little bit, it doesn't have to be that complex, and it can fit the situation. We also have this when you have kids, like if you have a stepchild that also needs to be taken care of in some capacity, if you have prior marriages, if you have inheritance, if you have certain things coming down the pipeline that nobody prepared you for, the court isn't going to prepare you either. So that's where we kind of come in. And I will say my personal, which I don't talk about my personal very often here, but my personal is that I am the breadwinner. And a long time ago, we determined that I could make more money per hour than he could. And that it would be, my stress level would be mitigated if we made sure that the house could run regardless of my emergencies or having to deal with so we made that agreement very early on in our marriage and very early on in kids. Like, are we going to pay for, so that was an agreement. Was it in writing? No. So what we're encouraging is for you to listen to this conversation and maybe redefine what a traditional wife is.
Yeah.
And
so
how,
let's talk about that. Because I think there's the trad wife movement, which is different than having one spouse who's a breadwinner and one spouse who stays home. But the same components that benefit the trad wife benefit the stay-at-home parent, whether that might be your husband or a woman who's staying at home. The trad wife is sort of a callback to the wife of the 40s and 50s, whose job was to submit to her husband in all ways, financially, sexually, with responsibility, and that it was her role to care for the children in the household and to ensure that her husband's needs, all of his needs, were always met. The trad wife back then and now doesn't have control over the finances. They don't have income of their own. They are not encouraged to be educated because what do you need that for? And they're really directed at the role being supporting the husband and the hierarchy of the relationship being husband first. Stay-at-home parents have a different dynamic. With our clients, we see often, probably, we have maybe a mom that went to college, worked for a while, never anticipated she'd stay home with the children. And then suddenly she's in our office 15 years later saying, I haven't been in the workforce for 15 years and I don't know what to do and I have no way to support myself. That dynamic is a little bit different because they didn't go into it intending to give up their power. But frankly, if they haven't done these 4 things to protect themselves, that's what they've done, whether they wanted to or not. So my goal for people that are Anna's age, that are like walking into marriage, and for people that are our age, that are maybe looking at second marriages, is know where you're vulnerable. You had the experts on the podcast. That was such a great show. Everybody needs to go back and listen to it. You discussed know where you are vulnerable. And there are, I think, 4 things that stay-at-home spouses can do and that trad wives, ladies, you have to do in order to make sure that this is a beneficial arrangement. Nobody has told the trad wives that there are things that they have to do. And so if I have to be that person today, I'm that person, Melissa.
I love it. Well, and I think the distinction is important because, again, we're not trying to create this as a judgment on whether you should or shouldn't, or how you should go about your relationships. What we're talking about is patterns that we see in divorce, patterns that we see when people are not protected or do not protect themselves, which everybody's gonna be like, well, I didn't do that. Well, how? Okay, the majority of people have not protected themselves. But what we see, and I see it in the finance world, is that we see wealthy families protecting their wealth or their family money with agreements that really leave that traditional wife out. And specifically from an estate planning or from, maybe it was estate planning, but maybe it was really divorce planning. And because somebody in the generations had a divorce that kind of was cataclysmic, right? So that's that's the discussion that you may not be aware. Like, you're going into this marriage thinking that I'm living in this beautiful $1 million house. And then you say, hey, where's that mortgage? Or who pays the taxes? And you're not on that deed. And that's not your house.
I empathize. When I was Anna's age and I was getting married, I was like, what are the wedding colors? What am I wearing? What are the bridesmaids wearing? What is the catering and the bar situation? I was extremely focused. We did have a great party, but that was like the extent of my focus. Anna, are you going to these weddings now where they're like 3-4 day long events? And they're like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes. And, I have a few. Okay. So before I'll answer this question, and then I have a note before we really get into the topics. But yes, I am seeing like the bachelorette culture is insane to me. It's the celebration because, this is kind of a sidebar, but it's social media as well. We've come into this society where the glorification of the coolest picture you can get. Like, are you getting married because you want the party, or are you getting married because this is someone that you see a future with? And
or you want to be an influencer.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that that's almost a whole nother conversation to have. But I think it goes into what I was going to say is you, Erika, we're going to get into the 4 different steps of how you can prepare to be a trad wife. But if you can't even have a conversation of any of these 4 things with your spouse, I think that's the biggest red flag, if we want to say red flag, because these are things that it's going to get a bit dicey to have these certain conversations. So when you're dating, when you're starting to get to know someone, just like, why is everything so taboo to talk about these days? Like, don't talk about politics, religion, or what, money? I don't know.
Money.
But why? Like, this is something that we should be having a conversation about because it's a legal agreement. So then when I'm in it, then what if I can't talk about it then?
We don't like being uncomfortable, right? And it's so fun to plan the 4 days of wedding excitement and all of those details. But the discomfort of having a 15-minute conversation with the person we're committing our life to it's a little too much to handle. And then I think what Melissa and I see on the back end is, when they didn't have that conversation over and over, we see things don't end well because you couldn't even have the discussion. And honestly, if I were going to marry someone again, and gentlemen, I'm probably not, so don't get excited. But like, if I were, I cannot imagine not having these difficult conversations first, because I think it tells you one of 2 things. It tells you either I can have a difficult conversation with this person. Maybe we agree, maybe we don't, but we can dialogue, right? Or that this person has different ideas from you, and now instead of knowing 20 years from now when you're in the lawyer's office. I can't imagine not entering into it without the conversation. But I don't know.
But the conversation is going to happen. The conversation is going to happen whether you have it today, tomorrow, or in divorce court. And that's the unfortunate conversation that has to, if you're not willing to ask now, how do we deal with these things in the future? and they're not willing to have that discussion, then it just might not be the right situation for you. But the other thing is, a lot of times people just say, well, we didn't talk about it because it was good. And like, we loved each other and it didn't matter any of that stuff. And that's true to an extent, that at the point that you actually start asking questions, you change the game. So if you're asking questions from the beginning and it's like, oh, my wife needs to know where everything is, or my husband needs to know where everything is, or if you're the spouse that's on the other side and you're not over communicating, then you're leading down a situation that when you start asking questions, it's like, well, why are you asking questions now? As opposed to, you've changed the game. Divorce is really sometimes a result of somebody changing the game. Like, we agreed to do it this way, and now you change. It's rational, but it's a change that could result in the divorce because you didn't have the conversation when you had control. At the moment that you give up all the control and you now want to have a conversation and you have no actual or perceived control in that conversation, then you're just a child begging for attention. And that is, like, that's some of the psychology behind it that I think I see sometimes happen.
And what we don't want to have happen with trad wives is that they become the disempowered child that has nothing, that knows nothing, and that is subject to the whims of the authoritarian parent. We know how romantic and lovely the idea is that you'll be taken care of forever. Like, oh, that is sweet. As a single mom, looking at right now the calendar, thinking, okay, I have to pay my rent in 2 days. And I do this every month. Like, that idea, I won't lie, is nice. So I can see why it draws people. But at the same time, if you want to do that, there are ways you can protect yourself, and there are ways you can do your number one job better, which is protect your family. If that is your role as a trad wife, is to protect your family, protecting yourself will help you do that.
Well, and one thing that I'll bring in, and then we'll kind of go into it, is that we have this false assumption that the court system is going to protect us and that the court system are police and they're going to come in and say, this person needs to continue to pay my rent or continue to give me half of the money that we have been making and utilizing for the last 20 years. They have this belief that there's some omniscient power in the court system that's going to come right the wrongs if your spouse does something. And that's not actually true. It actually is that the state and the court system is not properly capable of protecting you. It's a responsive, like, well, it's gray, so we think you should maybe go left and then right and then left and right and again, but like, we don't know, so you have to take control of some of this regardless. And that's the point of today's conversation, is to take control of your life and say, if this is the right thing for you, perfectly fine, but be prepared. And if you want any other type of relationship, this still applies. You should still do this in any capacity as a relationship builder on the future for potential marriage and maybe prevention of divorce. But that's a lot, I know. So what are some of the steps? Like, what do we even do? What are we doing here, Erika? Tell me.
We do. And this is hard news for the romantics in the Midwest that want to graduate high school and they want to get married. Anna, I'm sorry. That was my goal, by the way, in 8th grade, was to get married the day after I graduated from high school, because my babysitter did that. She was pretty and it looked perfect. I understand this, but here is the deal.
Yeah.
You need some level of post-high school education. And it really doesn't matter what it is, for 2 reasons. First of all, what it is going to do to have any level, like maybe you have a coding certificate, you got a project management certificate, you went to community college and you got an AA, like you have something. One thing that it's going to do is you have a door open if you have to go into the workforce. You don't have to start with the question of like, oh, what am I qualified to do? Nothing. You can start with, what do I already have in my pocket? And it's so much easier to take the second step when the first step is taken for you. So if you divorce, but like any of the other 3Ds happen, if there's a death, if there's a disability, if there's a disaster, if there's a divorce, one of these things will happen in every relationship, and maybe more than one. You'll have that like first step. You'll have that little push. Oh, I have a project management certificate that I got on Coursera for $500. I can start there. And the other thing it does, honestly, this is shade to people who choose to not engage in any higher education. It makes you more interesting and engaged in the world. You are going to be more fun to talk to at parties. You're going to have an easier time helping your children with their absolutely crazy math homework, keeping abreast of the news, keeping yourself empowered politically, just like that little reach, I think, that people do after high school. They take that second step. It really does create this empowerment and engagement that will give you a fuller life. Like I know people that don't want their student loans and regret them, and same, but I haven't heard anyone say, I wish I didn't know the things I learned in college. I wish I could unlearn the certificate that I got in financial management. People don't say that. So that's step one.
One thing that I think, and Anna does this a lot more, is that if you have identified experience or skills or capabilities, those are a lot easier to sell online. And online capabilities have been way more prevalent now in the past 5 years than they ever have, which give women an option to have a side hustle or a side thing if you understand. But what if you get educated? Like, if some of your background is in finance, like, do you see people asking their spouse to be like, well, maybe I'll manage the money. Maybe we can separate this out. Like, I don't see them giving up control a lot, but you would at least have, if you're educating yourself about things, it brings you to your spouse and say, well, I'd like to help work on our budget. I'd like to meet our financial planner. I'd like to meet our accountant,
Okay, and this brings me to number 2, which is if you would like to be a trad wife, and we love this for you, your husband is going to be the CEO of the family. He is the CEO. He is number one in charge of everything. You are probably going to become what we call in the corporate world the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. The COO is the person that handles all the details, really, of everyday logistical life. So the COO of the family is the one who is registering for daycare and swim lessons, making sure that children have vaccines, making sure that people have insurance policies. That's the COO. And as a trad wife, you will be great at that. You will. But what role you can also pick up without usurping your husband at all is you can become the CFO too. You can become the Chief Financial Officer. You're still submitting to the authority of the CEO, but your role is knowing where the money is, how it is budgeted, how it is spent, and helping influence the decisions that are made with money. Because right now, Anna, you have single friends paying their own bills. They know, when your credit card bill is due, you know how to pay your rent and your checking account number. Can you imagine a world where you didn't?
Yeah, so this is interesting because last week I was just messaging my friends, and a lot of my friends are highly educated, way beyond high school education. And I said, girls, would you be interested in like a financial crash course? And if so, what topics would you want to know? And they all replied instantly, yes, how to do my taxes, investing in my Roth, how to diversify my investments, and the difference between different credit cards. And then I thought to myself, okay, yes, we know how to pay our bills, absolutely, we know how to budget, but how do people even access the financial education to take it a step further? Because yes, we have these amazing college educations, but I only know about my Roth because my dad told me. How can we go as a young female, a young anyone, how do we access that financial education?
Well, Melissa, you could probably speak to this better than I, but I think you don't get step 2 without step 1. And
Yeah.
step 1 is understanding your basic financial picture. So
Yeah.
Melissa and I have seen, I'm sure, dozens and dozens of clients come through the door and they say, I don't know if I have retirement accounts. I don't know if we have life insurance. I think we have a trust. I don't know what's in it. So when you divorce yourself, and no pun intended, like from even step 1, you'll never get step 2.
Yeah.
And if your friends are going into marriage and they are marrying somebody who wants to take over the budget, I can almost guarantee, right, Melissa, that they will give up budgeting responsibilities to that person. Because like, if you're like me and you don't like handling the money and your spouse does, then marriage is such a good excuse to be like, oh my gosh, we're both happy if you do this.
And that's why we kind of structured some of this conversation around how do you talk business to business people? Because for the most part, that person who is professionally motivated is, even if you're in the professional trades, you have to have some business acumen to be a plumber, to be an electrician, to be anybody out there, and even more so in some of those. So if you start talking the talk and you start, like, part of this, Anna, is self-education. Part of it is wanting and having the desire to have independence while being in a relationship. Like, part of this is relationshiping different because it's a different time era and things aren't the same anymore. And, yes, I don't want to handle all the finances and you're better at it, but every 3 months we should sit down and have a family meeting so that I know where everything is and we feel comfortable. We should talk about how we purchase, and not like specific, but I will tell you, a lot of times people get divorced when they buy different, like me and my husband, we don't buy expensive things, but if we did, there'd be a threshold, like $1,000, well, maybe 5,000. And we would say, hey, we should talk about how we're buying things and have an agreement. Like, when somebody says, my husband bought me a car or my wife gave me a car, and you're married, that conversation doesn't make sense to me, because, so do you care? Do you want to be given a car, and do you not care? What we're telling you is you can enjoy the fruits of that labor and not ask the questions. But when it comes down to divorce, we're not going to see that you're going to prevail in a positive manner. That person is going to have a lot of the keys. And the court system doesn't protect you. So again, you can go in and make sure that some of these things are happening. You can start to pay attention. And I think that the narrative is changing. It's just like it's not changing fast enough, and so we're seeing a bunch of 20-year trad wife marriages ending.
Yeah.
And we're seeing patterns in them. And so we're like, hey, future generations, how do we prevent this? You got a relationship different. You got to communicate different. And it's not about sitting back and letting anybody take control of any of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really, how do you be the best person in that and have those conversations? And the worst part is you have to be willing to accept that that person doesn't show up as you think they would. Now, that conversation should probably be had before you get married, if that's the case, because then you have control to walk away. And that's all we're encouraging, is the conversation to happen before you take those steps. Because once you take the steps, the unwinding is not a path that you're aware of or capable, and it's going to be expensive. So some of the other things that I think Erika was talking about is also important. And these are ways to just start to get in front of these professionals, or, because some of these are at the beginning, some of them are in the middle, right? Like like talking about
you are a CDFA, which is a certified divorce financial analyst. I like to think of the CDFA a little bit broader, because divorce doesn't impact every marriage. But the D could be death, disability, or disaster. So even, Anna, for someone who wants more financial knowledge, they don't plan on getting married or like anytime soon. They don't plan on getting divorced if they do get married. If we think of the CDFA a little bit broader, like you are going to encounter disaster. We all encountered COVID. We all understand now how the world can change so quickly. You may encounter disability or death, and these are things that you can plan for when you're young and single, like whatever you might see for yourself. But if you're going to be a trad wife, be the CFO. Say to your husband, I will take this off your plate and serve you by ensuring that our finances are taken care of and you never have to worry about that. And that is a win-win because you have done your job of being subservient to your husband and making his life easier while also doing the job of keeping yourself in the loop with all of the finances.
But which may not be you doing the finances, right?
No, just
CFOs could
knowing.
coordinate the people. You could coordinate the accountant and the financial planner and the people. You don't necessarily have to have all the knowledge in your own head as well.
Agree. And if you hate math and if you get stressed about money because of how you were raised, that's okay. It is the management of the logistics. Just like you don't provide the swim lessons as mom, but you find the person who will give your children the swim lessons. It's the same role for the finances. And really important, if you're a stay-at-home parent, not just a trad wife, but a stay-at-home parent at all, I cannot overestimate to you the importance of disability insurance and life insurance. We don't like paying for that because it is money out of pocket now that benefits our future self. And as my 11-year-old always says, Mama, that's a problem for my future self. And like that, I understand, but it is like my role to help you connect with your future self. And disability insurance, life insurance are the two things that are going to protect you if you lose this only stream of income that you have. So this is something, whether you're a trad wife or you're a stay-at-home parent, you are solely reliant on one source of income, which means in the event of death or disability or disaster, you need a second way to support your family. And it is critical that if you have a husband who plans to financially support the family, that those financial plans can extend to covering sufficient insurance policies.
Yeah, I think that
I know we don't have
even
to pay for it.
well, but even I think in divorce, we use some of those instruments to protect, alimony and maintenance. We'll use the life insurance and things like that. But I think in general, again, it's understanding the policies. It's understanding where your home mortgage is. Like it's the logistics that if you don't know where any of that stuff is and you don't have online access and you can't see the statements, then you are sort of at the behest of what somebody shares with you, right?
And that's so scary and disempowering if you have somebody in a hospital who can't communicate, who's on a ventilator. How many people do we know that were impacted by COVID? And you have a mortgage to pay and you literally don't know how to pay the mortgage. Like, this is a basic level that will help people in any relationship. But okay, there is something really specific to trad wives that I recommend that is something I don't necessarily recommend just to the stay-at-home parent, because this is about the power dynamic, which is, Melissa, you said the court does not protect people. And we have heard 1,000,000 times, courts are so unfair to women. They penalize women in all these ways. We have heard courts are so unfair to men. They penalize men in all these ways. And the truth is, they're not fair to either. Like, it's not really the court's job to protect anyone as an individual as much as it is the court's job to ensure that there's not like a wild breakdown of society. So for you, if you're going to be a trad wife, you can get a prenuptial agreement. This is a basic. I recommend it. but get a prenuptial agreement that grants you rights in excess of what the law would grant you. And here are some, just like quickly, specifically, in the event of divorce, that you will have an immediate award of attorney fees. Immediate. Because if you need to contest your prenup or even get advice on your prenup and you don't have access to the bank account, that is the first thing that will be taken from you, and you won't even have $1 to see an attorney. So a prenup should say, for someone who plans to be a traditional wife, there will be an immediate award of attorney fees at the outset of the separation. Number 2, that there should be support of a minimum duration for you as a spouse. We can't put child support in prenups, but we can put spousal support. And you can say, I want a minimum number of years and a minimum amount of dollars. That way you're not like leaving it up to the law. And the third recommendation is that if you are the primary parent, and you're going to be if you're a trad wife, that this prenuptial agreement allows you the right to stay in the home, regardless of the outcome of divorce. Because Melissa and I both know that the first thing that happens is the money is taken. The second thing that happens is the home is threatened. And when the home is threatened, the other parent can try to take children away. And suddenly, literally, your purpose for living is gone. So these are things you can do in a prenup. Don't just get a prenup that's fair. That's what I recommend, Anna, to your friends. They're going into a marriage. They don't necessarily need to out-negotiate their spouse, because you guys are going to be both contributing. But someone who's giving up 20 years to stay out of the workforce and who's giving up those years in their life, they deserve something on the back end to compensate them for that. And I think, Melissa, you would agree. We see women, they don't have attorney fees, they lose the house, and they don't get the spousal support that they wanted. Not just one of those scenarios, but like commonly you've seen all three.
Oh, I mean, these 3 things are flippin' brilliant, Erika. Like, I got to be honest with you. They address the immediate award, because I have clients that come in and they're like, I've put away $20,000 to get divorced. And I was like, oh, that's adorable. But like, that's going to get you a retainer for your team, and that'll get you the first month. Right. And they're like, what? How could this be? I've saved this money for forever. Okay, well, you need it immediate. And some of the other issues is if you just have joint money or separate money and you try to move it, the implications are sometimes detrimental as well, because now you look like the person. Support for a certain number of years and amount. Oh my gosh, because then you can sit back and really focus on the marriage. In my mind, sometimes a prenup allows you to be like, oh, okay, well, I know that we have an idea of how to figure it out, but I just want to be in love and married. It allows that because you've already established what that looks like. We usually have some language around that, but I think being very specific in prenups is better than being vague on money, right? And then allow the right to stay in the house. A lot of times people want to stay in the house until the kid becomes 18 or something like that. Having more flexibility because they still come back for college or things like that. I think all 3 of those freaking brilliant. And because a lot of things will change. So establishing a minimum, establishing that everything we create is ours together, establishing how this looks like. And but you saying get better than when you go to court is really key, because going to court is your worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
Like, if the court gives you it, then that's like the minimum. So you want to know, okay, the court would give me this, or the court would have me go fight for everything. How can I get some immediate help in it? And, it is a negotiation tool. So you would go back and forth on some of this, but some of the basic knowledge or basic tenets that you just talked about cover you in those very critical 6 months at the beginning of divorce, which is most of the time when people are so overwhelmed and frustrated that they cave and settle for a settlement that is horrible.
Absolutely.
Well, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
From that. So
Please.
these marriages, the trad wife marriages, are already set at a certain level of power. There's difference. So, and for this ironclad prenup, you're like, these are very specific amounts. Are you seeing that the husband or the breadwinner, I guess, combats that? Because that's a lot to ask for, especially when there's a big power dynamic.
I love that you asked for that, because the male component of the trad wife marriage is, I will never divorce you. I will always care for you financially. And if they intend to hold up their end of the bargain, why do they have a problem signing a prenup that grants you rights in excess of the state? If they're going to keep you happy in your marriage, cared for in your marriage, and do what they're supposed to do as the head of the family, then there won't be a divorce and these terms won't matter. If you have someone who wants to be your trad husband and doesn't want to talk about a prenup and doesn't want to guarantee a future where you're safe and secure, then I think, like, congratulations, girl. That is not the right trad husband. If you want to be a trad wife, choose the right trad man. And the right trad man will be so secure that he won't divorce you and that he'll always provide for you, that he'll put it in writing.
Okay.
Well, and again, I think the harder piece of the relationship is facing that reality. Like we don't ask those questions because we're really concerned that they'll leave us. And that's, abandonment issues and other things that we have to deal with. But if we look back to like how we're relationshiping, if we're not asking those questions, we're not saying that we're important enough to know it. We're not establishing that pattern of communication back and forth. And we're really more scared that we will have to face the fact that we would have to leave them. We're scared that we would have to abandon this relationship that we've worked so hard on because we couldn't get past the final step of communicating our agreement. Like, it's not a prenup. It's just, we're agreeing, like, you want me to do this and I would like you to do this. Like, are we agreeing to this? It doesn't mean that the terms have to be acceptable to anybody else. It means that we are agreeing to the terms for our unique relationship. And if that person says no, I think we don't ask the question because we don't want to face I have to leave then. I would have to exit. And that is hard.
I understand. And I would rather have people have that hardship than the hardship of coming into my office, perhaps with young children, 3 young children, out of the workforce for 15 years, no skills, no resume. Husband suddenly has got a drop in income. The house is being sold. He's pursuing custody and she's sobbing at my desk. Like that. But if we have to choose between a rock and a hard place, what I want for you is to know, like Melissa, you said, the conversation will happen. Death, disability, divorce, disaster will happen in your marriage. So do you want to have it now while it's hard? Or do you want to have it later when it's impossible?
But that same woman that came in, right? That came in with the same scenario that you're talking about. Some of the pieces of it, though, are lack of a pattern at the beginning of being able to say what you need. And the pattern of sometimes people who want some of that control over another person is going to be to entitle, like, let's move in before we get married. So now you're already in a power dynamic that is shifted that you don't realize, and so now you're negotiating, but you're actually negotiating under duress because they have that primary shelter that is over you. The other thing that you have to be aware of is that that woman came into your office and she said one thing, and I'll tell you what she said. He's not taking my kids. It never, typically when they come in, they're never talking about money. They're talking about the kids, and they will use the kids to get to the money. And so that's where we have these coercive control and these manipulations with the kids, because they know that that's your Achilles heel. They know that that's your
I'm
weakness.
like, wow, this is such an important conversation. And I think we should set aside another time to talk about what are the flags that Anna's friends can see. Where are the green, the red, and the beige flags, as TikTok would say, about we're entering into a relationship that is leading to coercive control? For purposes of this discussion, one has to wonder, the man who wants total control and total power in a relationship, is there a way that he can do that ethically and responsibly? Does it say something a little bit scary about a man if he wants and believes that it is his role to preside over the family? So you have to sort of look at it like, if somebody even wants that in the first place, if they believe that they are superior to you, it's a red flag. It's a big red flag. So I know we see the coercive control. It happens like Ernest Hemingway said, bankruptcy. It happens slowly and then all at once, and you cannot get out of it. So we look at, what do we see at the beginning? If you see someone who says, I want total control and power and dominance in this relationship, then all that I want you to do as a trad wife is to say, then what I want is knowledge and protection. And if that's not a fair trade for him, I don't care how great your bachelorette party was. Like that, he is not the one.
Right.
Yeah.
5 days of a party does not equate to 10, 15, 20 years of misery. So.
Well, and even the ring, the proposal, all of it, like all of that is not necessarily going, like, okay, I bagged him, like he finally proposed, like I'm the one, we're getting married. Again, it's not like the state has come back around with its protection and protected both of you. And sometimes one more than the other, or it just falls through the cracks. So you're being proactive by establishing how you relationship at a younger age, but it is still like, okay, so that's a great idea. Like I would sit back and be like Anna right now and be like, great idea, guys. But if I don't know how, like this then comes down to a communication issue of standing up for yourself or saying that I'm worthy and those are hard things. So I mean, it feels like I'm going to have to work with somebody to even get to that stage to have a conversation, but
it sounds like that's what Anna and her friends are doing. And I don't know about you, Gen X, like we did not do that. We did not, we were not validated in our emotions, period, let alone made aware of the incredible emotional attachment to how money is saved, spent, and used. We had no idea about the connection between emotion and money. And like Anna, at least if your friends are saying, hey, I know the basics and I want more, go get more. The piece of advice I would add is also look at, what is my own emotional relationship with money, with saving, and with spending? Because no matter where you're going to go next in your life, personally or professionally, you cannot go wrong with knowing yourself a little bit more before you get started.
Well, I think that's the summary of this whole conversation, right? With money, with relationships, with even, I love your first point, is just the education aspect. Just, if you're feeling like you can't even find someone to date, go find a purpose, go find something extra to
bring
fill
to the
your own
table.
cup up. You don't have to run to find a spouse. And at the end of the day, that's the whole theme of this conversation, I think.
Well, and we're going to kind of wrap it up because I think we've talked about a lot of things, but an additional piece is that I got married to have babies. Like I was told you have babies after you get married. And I wanted to have some babies because I was told that that was my role. So I was like, yeah, but I'm super independent and I also can make money, but I still want to have them babies. And so I need to get married. So again, generations have had different reasons for how to get married, and then it structurally creates some issues in that. But realistically, it doesn't matter how you want to endeavor to relationship or marry. If you start to downplay how bad or judgment around like we even start calling them premarital agreements, like take your judgment outside of that and say, this is something to protect me. This actually will make me seem smarter with my husband or my spouse as well, because I'm trying to educate myself. I'm trying to bring them, myself up to that educational level to have these discussions. And I think it's just self-preservation in general. I mean, because I'm almost at the point of recommending somebody do a prenup or not get married. But like, there's no just winging it alone, in any capacity, because it just doesn't seem logical from a business standpoint. But I don't know, Anna, does it?
If it's like, hey, it's prenup or don't get married, and people are like, well, that's too much, so I'm going to go ahead and get married without doing anything, then I'm going to give contrary advice to you and say, at the very least, have a conversation. And it's not just good for you and your rights and your future. It's good for your potential spouse and their rights and their future to just say, would you like to get in alignment about having children? If we're going to raise them in religion, if a parent's going to stay home, what happens if one of us is a spender and one's a saver? Do you want to open a bottle of wine and have a talk about it? And like, I think it will just tell you so much about that person and about yourself to even start with a conversation.
I think that's actually immaculate advice, because I'm always a black or white. I'm in the money land, right? And you're in the middle.
I am the middle child. I am the Aquarius. There is always a smaller step. So I think that's one reason it's great to get a difference of opinions as you're entering into marriage and your adult life, because you can take what really resounds and lands with you and then move forward with something that works.
Well, and we're going to show some of the ways to work with you, and you can tell us a little bit more about how people hire you and work with you. But I think in general, the conversation, if nothing happens, but the conversation helps you relationship in a better way, that's all we're trying to accomplish, is that we start to prevent divorce. And like that conversation, if you could actually have that conversation, I would say that could go 95% of the way to preventing divorce, because you've talked about these things. You've addressed some of the areas like, oh, you only want to have boys that play soccer. Well, I don't know if that's how that works. Like it will identify the issues and then you'll be like, oh, it's not a big issue, or it is. And you can then pivot, but the conversation is the best. But now people have listened to this and they're like, Melissa might be crazy, but I definitely want to find out about Erika. How do they, like, what are you doing lately? Because I know you're in the background working with people and nobody knows about it, but like you're a secret weapon. Like, how do they get in contact with you?
My website is erikaenglund.com, which I started before I thought about how tricky the spelling of my name is and how awkward that will be for people. So you can put it up, erikaenglund.com. I work in California as a mediator, an attorney, and a strategist. Strategy is best for people who are starting in their process or stalled in their process. If your process is going great, I don't need to see you. But starting or stalled, come see me in California. I am determined to spend as much time as possible in Lake Tahoe this summer. But when I am in my office in Folsom or over Zoom, I am delighted to work with anybody who just doesn't want to accept the standard divorce and feels like there might be a better, less expensive, nicer, sleeker, more efficient way to do it. There is. That's what I do. That is what I will help you with.
I love how you say that, because I think that's exactly right. When somebody is stalled, I think we're starting to help them kind of maneuver. I like to say that if you're the CEO of your divorce, then you also have to be willing to hire and fire your team. And if your team has gotten you to a certain level, that might be the level that they can get you. But, realistically, you have to know if that's the level that you want to be at. So I think it's great to know other strategists. Sometimes, you've talked specifically about California. Sometimes the legal issues are very state specific, and the financial issues might be more national. So again, address your own situation, reach out. Erika, do you ever offer to kind of talk with people at the beginning for a little bit to understand their situation? Is that
I
available?
always consult for free for couples that are interested in mediation. It's
Okay.
a wonderful, very low-key opportunity for you to learn about the process. And if you're not right for my process, I will be very honest about that and give you other resources.
Okay.
For people who don't know, do I need an attorney, a strategist, a mediator? Do I need all three? Absolutely. Text me and we'll have a discovery chat. There's no cost to that, just to help you understand in what direction might I need to take that first step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's important. I think that the level that we're getting involved, it usually does take a conversation to say, is this the right fit? And so I appreciate all of the amazing information. And Erika, I feel like already alluded to the fact that we would talk about more complex things. So I think she's on the hook.
I hope I'm
excited.
allowed back. Okay, perfect.
Definitely.
Erika, I feel like you could be the host. Like, this is amazing. Like, I could sit back and you do the questions. This is great.
There's so much to talk about, right? I mean,
Yeah.
by now at this point, we all have different angles on this.
Yeah.
We've all seen different things. We've all seen the same patterns, and it's endlessly fascinating to me. So again, that tax teacher, thank you. Thank you. I am here on this podcast because that tax teacher told me I couldn't be an estate planner. And honestly, I could not be happier. And I will look so forward to future conversations with both of you.
Yeah. And my finance teacher freshman year told me to never go into finance. So I'm glad I didn't listen to her. No, just kidding.
See? Look at you. Look
She
at
was
her
like, your
now.
personality is maybe not for numbers. And I was like, I think it's fine for numbers.
Oh, I would disagree. Yes. Yeah. I am delighted you have found your way here, and we have found our way to each other, because in this business, it has been too hard for me to find people that I feel are straightforward, honest, empathetic. And that's something that comes like so naturally to me that it's hard to know that there aren't a ton of people out there. And I love to chat with you because we're so different in our styles. But both of us just care so much about making sure that people know the real information so they can make the right decisions for themselves. And then whatever they decide, we're going to support the hell out of them.
Well, and I think paving a new way through the system that's not heavily involving the court, and really aligning it for the legal things and aligning other people and teams for the other areas. And it's really redefining how we divorce. So I think you and I are absolutely aligned in that. And I look forward to talking to you on a regular basis about all sorts of fun strategic divorce topics. So we
This
appreciate
was
you.
amazing. Thank you so much, Erika.
I love it. And Anna, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun for me.
It
I
was
hope
fun
you
for me.
guys have a good summer, and I will look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, I love it. Thank you.
Great.